This is Steve Young for the Co-Roundtable. It's the middle of June, 2021. One of the big issues, that's sort of understating the case here in the United States, and I think people all around the world know, because since the death here of this African American man, George Floyd, a year ago, is what can we think about the situation of many African American families here? One of the facts of many African American individuals and families, which seems to be true, is what is called by some generational poverty, which, as I understand it, means that if you're an African American today and your grandfather was born in poverty and never got out of poverty, odds are your father never got out of poverty, and odds are that you are in poverty today and have very few odds of getting out of poverty. So what can we think about getting out of poverty? Is this a general problem that applies to everybody? Is there something unique about the African Americans in America, given the history of slavery and segregation and other kinds of discrimination? Is there a special approach that's needed, or do we need to do something about poverty? I've been thinking a bit that the Co-Roundtable has kind of maybe an answer to this in the way it thinks about capitalism. And the way the Co-Roundtable, looking at moral capitalism, has evolved is to come up with, let's call it, a systems theory. That capitalism is actually about more than money. Traditionally, we think about, and not so much Adam Smith, I think, but clearly with Karl Marx and the whole tradition, early 19th century, of unease with capitalism, is that capitalism is about greed. It's about making profits. It's about finance. When we talk about capital, most people think, well, that's the money side. And if you look at the way we account in and around economics, we account for finance. You have a balance sheet. What's a balance sheet? It's basically assets which you can reduce to cash. You have a profit and loss statement. What's that? That's the amount of cash you take in and the amount of cash you have to spend out. But I want to say, in line with one of those old songs, is that all there is? Is capitalism really just about money and finance? That's certainly the stereotype. But if you add the concept of moral capitalism, you're adding a non-financial dynamic. That non-financial dynamic, many people now talk about as stakeholders. Stakeholders involve social capital and human capital. And there's certain people in the field of corporate social responsibility, sustainability, who are working on a social and human capital protocol to pay attention to this. But if capitalism is actually a complex system of three forms of capital, and there's also natural capital, then how do you apply all those capitals to the situation of poverty? Why are we not applying social capital and human capital? We're talking about education. We're talking about the sense of community. We're talking about whether people trust each other, whether you can borrow money because people think you're a reliable person. I think we should think more systemically, more broadly, more comprehensively about capitalism so that we can focus on overcoming poverty.